Hello, everybody. Happy Monday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. Victory Monday. And today we have a new video. But before we dive into the football content, let's talk about another subscriber milestone. We have reached 1,220 subscribers to the channel. Thank you to everybody who's gotten me there. Let's go for 1,500 by the end of the year. Let's go for 1,250 by the end of the month. We've got a couple days left. We're doing well. We're picking up subs every single day. The channel is growing. Let's go ahead and try to meet a stretch goal here. And once again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If I was not getting viewers on my videos, I would not be making them. So thank you to everybody who has made this channel a success in recent times. I never thought I would get to this point. Your support is appreciated. Thank you to all of the subscribers, new and old. And today, we are going to talk about the bottom feeders of the NFL. And there's a very specific reason why we're going to do that, and it very much plays into whatever success or lack of success the Seahawks may have in 2020. So, we are going to take a look at this article to start. This article is over a year old. The information is not completely accurate, but it's easy enough to fill in the gaps. This article is titled History of NFL Teams That Start 0-3 and 3-0. And if you scroll down a little bit, you get to the important information. Since 1980, only 3.4% of teams to start 0-3 made the playoffs. So basically, if you start 0-3, your odds of making the playoffs are statistically insignificant. Anything below 5% is considered statistically insignificant. Going back to 1980, which is now about 40 years of football, there have been 176 teams to start a season 0-3. Only 6 of them have gone on to make the playoffs. Now, last year, there were 5 teams that started 0-3. The Steelers, the Broncos, the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Bengals. None of these teams made the playoffs. So we can actually stretch this number out a little bit more and arrive at about 3.3%. 6 out of 181. And we have only had one team make the playoffs this millennium after starting 0-3, and that was the 2018 Texans. So clearly, it's just not something you can ever reasonably expect to happen. It happens so rarely, you can discount the times where it does happen as statistically insignificant. I can also say, after doing some research, that I cannot find a single 0-2-1 team that has made the playoffs. Now, 0-2-1 does not happen pretty much ever. In fact, this may very well be the first season in NFL history where we have 2 0-2-1 teams to start the year. But the point is, if you get through your third game and you have 0 wins, your odds of making the playoffs are statistically insignificant. It's not going to happen. Now, this year we do have an extra playoff spot. We do have 7 playoff spots per conference. That probably boosts the odds a little bit, but we're talking maybe from 3% to 5%, maybe 7%, certainly not more than 10%. And we also have 2 winless teams in a historically terrible division in the NFC East. So that probably boosts their odds a little bit on top of that too. So for those 2 teams, their odds of making the playoffs might be 12, 14%, certainly not more than 16%, I don't think. A mathematician could solve this better than I could, but the point is, we have 8 teams with 0 wins after 3 games. The Jets, the Bengals, the Texans, the Broncos, the Eagles, the Giants, the Vikings, and the Falcons. And the odds of any of those teams making the playoffs this year are low. So, if the NFL season's a race, like a car race, then these 8 teams, they're about to get DQ'd. Their cars are barely sputtering around the track. They're lagging way behind. They're just barely moving forward. They can't even see the cars in front, like the Seahawks. The Seahawks are one of the teams with a car in front. And they're about to just get waved off, and they're just going to pull over, and the race is going to be over. But the thing is about those teams, about those cars, not everything in that car is worthless. The car as a whole is worthless, but some of the components are still good and still valuable. You could pop open the hood. Maybe you can find a spark plug in there that's still valid. Maybe you can say, hey, that carburetor is still working pretty good. Maybe the gearbox is fine. There's something in there under that hood that would be great in a car that is actually running better. It just can't get a chance to shine because the whole rest of the car is that bad. So, as one of the front runners in this race so far at 3-0, the Seahawks need to take a look at these cars that are about ready to roll over to the side of the road and die and get whatever components they can out to make their car better. Because we're 3-0, we're at the front of the race, but there are cars right there with us. Whoever wins tonight is going to be one of them, probably a couple others as well. So, how are we going to do that? The answer is we make a trade. So what kinds of trades can we make with these teams? Because these 8 teams should all have the same mentality. And that mentality is next year, baby. Time to fire sale. Let's get rid of some veterans who aren't going to be here for very long. Let's get rid of some veterans who aren't going to be any good by the time we're good again. Let's get rid of some rookies on rookie contracts who are maybe a little disappointing to us, who we just want to move on from because we don't want to pay them, but we don't want to lose them for nothing. All these 8 teams should really start thinking about the next era because this current era has clearly just completely failed. So, we're going to be taking a look at the 8 teams that I just mentioned, look at their rosters, and see what the Seahawks could use. So, first, before we do that, let's take a look at what the Seahawks actually have to offer in a trade. So, let's start with some draft picks in the upcoming years. So let's hop onto this site, Pro Sports Transactions. What do we have in terms of draft picks for the next 2 years? The answer is not a whole heck of a lot. As you can see here, we gave up our first rounder and third rounder to the Jets next year. So we have our second rounder, fourth rounder, fifth rounder, sixth rounder, and we have 2 seventh rounders. In 2022, it's a little better, but not great. We do not have our first round pick because we traded it to the Jets. No second rounder. We do have our second rounder, third rounder. We have 2 fourth rounders, which is actually pretty nice. Fifth rounder, sixth rounder, seventh rounder. So we don't have a lot to offer in terms of draft picks, especially compared to the usual because of the Jamal Adams trade. But this is still enough. These draft picks are still enough to net a pretty good haul of players if we decide to take this route. Now, what about what players we could give up in a trade? So let's take a look at the depth chart for the Seahawks real quick before we figure out what kinds of players we might want to pluck out of these other teams. Well, the way I see it, Rashad Penny, who's not listed on this depth chart, is chief among the potential tradees because we just don't have room for him on this team right now, especially because Carson is supposedly going to be fine. I would also throw David Moore in as well. He's playing well to start the season, but when Josh Gordon gets back, he's not really going to have much room to do much of anything. He's also got a little bit of value as a punt returner, but I don't think I could pass up the opportunity to trade David Moore in a package if it netted us somebody really good. I would also say Jacob Hollister is on the list because especially when Colby Parkinson gets back, I just don't think the snaps are going to be there for Jacob. He's got a little bit of value because he's put up some decent numbers last year. Again, these are not players who are going to get us a ton of value in a trade. These are players who are going to be part of a package with a pick that can maybe put the package over the top. Maybe you package a 4th round pick and Rashad Penny and you get a pretty good player. Maybe you package a 5th round pick and Jacob Hollister and you get a semi-impact defensive lineman, stuff like that. These are not super valuable players at all. Don't get me twisted. All right, so defensively, the only pieces I can see as being possible trade options would be KJ Wright, and I don't think anybody's going to value KJ Wright for anything, so I'm not really expecting anything to happen there, but KJ seems expendable to me, and the big gun, the big cannon on this defense, the big trade chip is Shaq Griffin, who honestly is not playing very well, but he's on the tail end of a rookie deal and he made the Pro Bowl last year. There's probably somebody out there who gives Shaq some real value, even though he's not playing really well right now. So those to me are our trade pieces as of right now. There's nobody else on this roster I would be willing to give up unless it was a blockbuster. So that to me is the ammo that we have as we try to pillage broken down cars to help our sports car that is absolutely humming right now at the lead of the pack, top of the pack. Now, what kinds of players would we want? in a trade? What kinds of players would help this team? Well, the way I see it, number one need, well, the first need, I'm not going to say the most important need because I'm going to also push back on each of these suggestions as I make them. First, we have wide receiver. Now, I don't really think we need another wide receiver in a trade because David Moore is playing well, Freddie Swain is playing well. We're going to get Josh Gordon back in the upcoming months at some point, and we know how good Josh Gordon is. And if we want to get another blue chip receiver, you can always just sign Antonio Brown in November. But let's say we don't want to sign AB. Let's say we don't want the baggage. Let's say we don't trust him. You can trade for a big-time receiver who's better than David Moore and Freddie Swain, maybe better than Josh Gordon. And even if he's not better than Josh Gordon, then you've got 4 really great receivers in an offense that really just needs to open it up and throw the ball 50 times a game. So receiver is an option. Right tackle strikes me as the other good option. Brandon Shell has been a big disappointment so far, although he is still new to this offense. If you want to give Brandon Shell time, I understand, but for me, he's running out of time. We also have Jamarco Jones, who is promising, although I don't like him as much as a tackle. I like him more as a guard. But if you don't like either of those guys, right tackle is an interesting place to look at for maybe somebody you want to trade for. Beyond that, defensive end seems likely. We do have a couple guys who are playing pretty well, and we do have a couple guys who we are due to get back in a few weeks who we think are pretty good. Alton Robinson, Shaquem Griffin, and Darrell Taylor may very well come to the rescue, but there's also the possibility that they don't. And if they don't, we definitely want to consider trading for somebody to help bolster this edge pass rush. Defensive tackle is another position we should consider looking at. Now, I'm not big on this personally because I think the 4-man rotation we have on the interior right now is playing quite well. Reed made some plays against the Cowboys. Puna is playing great against the run, which is all we ever ask him to do. Monet has improved, and Anthony Rush has actually played pretty well. If we got one more guy, I wouldn't be against it. And honestly, you can make an argument that if we did get one more guy, it would be fine being somebody like Snacks or DeMarcus Christmas or somebody off the street. But if we can get a genuine pass rusher at defensive tackle, I think we should do it. So a defensive tackle is an option as well. I would also say outside linebacker is a consideration just because of the Jordan Brooks injury. He's going to be out a couple weeks, probably until the bye week if I had to guess. So if you don't like Cody Barton and you don't like DeAndre Walker and you don't like Shaquem Griffin playing outside linebacker, maybe we can talk outside linebacker. I'm personally not big on this at all. I don't want another linebacker, but if you don't like Brooks and you don't like Barton, I can understand why you might want to be thinking about this. And the last position that I could see as being of some need for this team right now is cornerback. It really kind of depends on whether or not Dunbar is going to be healthy anytime soon. Obviously, Trey Flowers ain't it. We can pretty definitively say that after what we saw yesterday. Shaquille Griffin might not be it either. For some reason, it's just not working out so far this year. So you can make an argument that we could also stand an improvement at cornerback. And to me, that's really about it. And I'm telling you guys, if you want to really improve at any of these positions, or maybe another position I didn't even mention, you got to make a trade. You can't just pick up people off the scrap heap like Clay Matthews or Snacks or people off our practice squad or this guy who's not on a team after 3 weeks for some reason. Those guys are no good. Trust me on that one, okay? The odds of any of those guys being monsters that just completely transform our team are slim to none. So, with that being said, we've got a lot to get through. This video is already quite long. This is going to be a long video, guys, so just buckle up. I'm going to tell you that right now because we are going to go through all 8 winless teams, and we're going to see what they have that we could potentially covet in a trade. All right, so we're going to start with the New York Jets. We're going to take a look at their roster. I don't see anything on their offense that I really covet, honestly. Their whole offense is just nothing that I value. So let's jump right over to defense here real quick, where I see 2 potential grabs that might be worth it. This first one I would only consider just because it's Adam Gase, because Adam Gase is the worst coach in the league, maybe the worst GM in the league for all we know. He might be willing to give up on a blue chipper after a year plus. Quinnen Williams, he's a 22-year-old blue chipper, went third overall last year, clearly improving in his second year. He's got 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss in the first 3 games. Now, no normal team would give up on the number 3 overall pick after, I think he's played 16 games. And I don't think the Jets are going to give up on Quinnen Williams. But if they decide, hey, we're really, really far away from competing, we're the worst team in the league, which the Jets probably are, and if they just decide, you know what, these guys are not going to be here in time for the next good Jets team, so let's just get rid of everything on this team with value and let's go for the next core. Let's just build around Becton, Denzel Mims, and everybody else can go. Then maybe you could get Quinnen Williams for it would probably be a pretty significant trade haul, but he's clearly got talent. So that would be interesting. He can play end or tackle in our defense, I think. But the much more realistic target, and something that I'm actually pretty optimistic on, I think this would work, is the outside linebacker slash defensive end Jordan Jenkins. He's 26 years old, and over the last 2 seasons, 2018 and 2019, he has 15 sacks, 38 QB pressures, and 15 tackles for loss. And he's already done with his rookie deal. He is currently on a 1-year, $5 million contract, very reasonably priced, very productive the last 2 years. He's exactly the kind of player the Jets might want to try to squeeze a 5th-round pick out of because they know he's not going to be there next year, and they know they're not going to do anything this year. So those are the only 2 players on the Jets that I see as being worth talking about at all. And again, I don't think the Jets are going to give up on Quinnen Williams already. So it's really just Jordan Jenkins. And that's really all I see from this team. All right, so now we're going to hop over to the Cincinnati Bengals, the other winless team, the next winless team. 0-2-1 in a tough division. I think you can kind of stick a fork in them, and I'm sure they've already stuck the fork in themselves. They were the worst team in the league last year. You don't turn around that quickly most of the time. So there are quite a few interesting targets on this team. I'm going to bring back the A.J. Green thing just for a minute here. I don't even know if we can trade for him given he got franchise tagged, and for some reason, clearly the Bengals don't want to trade him, and I don't know why. Any sane team would just build around Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Drew Sample, and just go from there. But for some reason, they want to hold on to A.J. Green until he's got nothing left. As of right now, A.J. Green is 32 years old. He's made 7 Pro Bowls, one of the best receivers of the last decade. Last 2 seasons, he really hasn't done anything because of injuries. This year so far, he's got 13 catches in 3 games playing with a rookie QB who's been pretty inaccurate, 116 yards. So I don't even know if you're that excited about trading for A.J. Green. You would definitely need the Bengals to take on some of his contract, but at this point, if the Bengals are willing to trade anybody, they should be willing to trade A.J. Green for a mid-level pick just to dump him, basically. So there's some upside with A.J. Green. He's certainly better than David Moore anyway, and he's probably still better than Josh Gordon. So A.J. Green, to me, is an interesting target. You could get him for a mid-round pick. The other guy on this Bengals offense that caught my eye, and I may get some hate for this one because this guy is a certified bum, but we know the talent is there. That is John Ross III, 24-year-old blue chipper. He went 7th overall not that long ago, I think. The team seems ready to give up on him. I think the team is just waiting for somebody to call and offer like a 6th-round pick at this point. I think they're done with him. I think they're sick of his BS. They're sick of his one-dimensional play style. I think they just want him out of there. So you could probably get John Ross III for like, I don't know, a 5th or a 6th-round pick at this point. Like, what are they holding on to at this point? He doesn't produce. He's had like 1 good game in his career. All he is speed, but this speed in this offense is very tantalizing to me. With John Ross getting Russell Wilson deep balls, it feels like something good could happen. So I want to throw him out there. I'm going to get some hate for it, but whatever. He's the definition of a talented guy who needs a change of scenery. Maybe this is the change of scenery. All right, let's bump on down to defense real quick. I see 3 guys here that I really like on this defense that I would love to go after. We've already talked about some of these guys at length in my streams. The first is Carlos Dunlap. He's a 31-year-old, 2-time Pro Bowler, so he's been very good in his career. He's not that good anymore, but over the last 2 seasons, full seasons, 17 sacks, 70 pressures, which is really good, and 21 tackles for loss over 2018 and 2019. He does have an $11 million cap hit this year, and his contract runs through 2021. You probably would have to move a little bit of money around to make it happen, but that's why we pay John Schneider his money. He needs to do something to earn it. So Carlos Dunlap would be awesome. He's at the age where he's not going to be that expensive. The Bengals should be in fire sale mode. The only thing I'll say, and this goes for the next couple players as well, the Bengals should have traded these guys years ago, and they didn't. So the fact that they didn't do it years ago tells me they might not be willing to do it now because they're, I don't know, sentimental, I guess. I don't know. Okay, next name is Geno Atkins, who has actually not played yet this year, which might actually be a good thing. He's got no wear and tear on his body, but 32-year-old, all-pro 2 times in his career, so he's been the best of the best in his career. Not that anymore, but over the last 2 seasons, he does have 14.5 sacks, 55 pressures, and 17 tackles for loss. And we are looking at a pretty meaty contract with Geno Atkins. $14.2 million cap hit. Contract runs through 2022. We would have to make some money hop around, but again, that's what GMs do. Make it happen, John Schneider, if the opportunity is there. The Bengals should be desperate to trade Geno Atkins. They might not, but they should be because of the situation their team is in right now. And the last guy, I don't know if the Bengals will trade this guy. They might see this guy as part of the next good Bengals team, but Sam Hubbard has played fantastically in his first 2 seasons. He's 25 years old. He has 14.5 sacks in his first 2 seasons, 32 pressures, and 17 tackles for loss. He's only getting better, too, honestly. This guy, they might view this guy as being the stud on the defense with Joe Burrow and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, for all I know. But if they decide he's already in his 3rd year, we don't want to wait for this offense to get good while Sam Hubbard's in his prime, let's get some value for him now. He might be a little expensive, but Sam Hubbard has played really well for the Bengals through his first 2+ seasons. All right, so that's it for the Bengals for me. We're going to move on to the Houston Texans now. Sorry, my printer's trying to eat a whole bunch of ink, I guess. All right, Houston Texans, the next winless team. Offensively, I see a few pieces that I'm kind of interested in, but not over the top. The first is Kenny Stills. He's the only of the name receivers on this Houston offense that I like. Will Fuller gets hurt too much. Brandon Cooks is basically already in a wheelchair with all those concussions. Randall Cobb's too old, but Kenny Stills is still moderately young. He's been moderately productive the last 2 years. He's talented. He's done things on many different teams in many different systems. He's 28 years old. Over the last 2 years, he's got 77 catches for over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. His contract expires at the end of this year. He's on a $7 million deal. It's pretty reasonable. His production is nil this year, basically, because Houston has too many receivers ahead of him. So, to me, Kenny Stills might be the one guy in this Houston offense who is better than his production. So, I kind of like Kenny Stills, and I kind of like Kiki Kuti. He hasn't produced a lot, but I remember hearing this guy's name a lot a couple years ago. And then, for whatever reason, he just never really got on the field. He's played basically 16 games in his career now, and he has 52 catches for 550 yards. He's 23 years old. He's got some upside. I kind of like him. Not the most exciting. He doesn't have a lot of production in the NFL, but I think Kiki Kuti might not have written the majority of his NFL story yet. The other name, and this is only if Houston is really trying to blow it up, and I do not expect this guy to be on the table at all, but I'm going to throw the name out there just for fun. Titus Howard, right tackle. He's been getting better with every game he's been playing lately. I think this is his 3rd year. He was a first-round pick, so he's a blue chipper. And if Houston really wants to blow it up and just build around Watson and Tunsil and that's basically it, then maybe they ship Titus Howard out for some value. But I think more likely is that they view Titus Howard as being part of the foundation of the future. So I don't think he's on the table. But if he is, I would definitely make a phone call about it because he's playing pretty well right now. All right, let's take a look at the defense real quick. I see a few names here that I think would be appetizing. The first is, and this is another guy I don't expect Houston to really be willing to trade, but they probably should, J.J. Watt. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, future Hall of Famer, 31 years old. His last 2 years, he has 20 sacks, 84 pressures, 22 tackles for loss, and 7 pass deflections. So he's still able to play at a very high level. He's missed significant time the last three of the last 4 seasons. This season so far, he's playing pretty well. He's got a couple sacks and a couple tackles for loss. I don't think Houston would trade him just because he's a legend for that team, and you don't want to give up on the greatest player in franchise history for anything. But if you're being real, by the time this Texans team digs themselves out of this hole and actually has a good team again, very likely J.J. Watt's just going to be over the hill. So they should be trying to get a little bit of value out of him while they can. And after he didn't play that well in 2019, he probably wouldn't be that expensive. But again, I just think Houston's going to hold on to him even if it hair lips them, because that's what you do sometimes with your future Hall of Famers. You hold on to them for a couple seasons too long and get nothing out of them, but they're future Hall of Famers, so you can't be too mad about it. If we did trade for him, he has a $15.5 million cap hit with a contract that runs through 2021. So not unreasonable to find a way to work with that contract, but it is fat. Another name on this defense, Whitney Merciless, outside linebacker for them. He would be a defensive end, kind of a Leo for us, I guess. He's 30 years old, so he's not prohibitively old yet. Over the last 2 years, he has 11 and a half sacks, 51 pressures, 14 tackles for loss, and he's got a pretty fat contract, 12 million cap hit this year. Runs through 2023, but you have an easy out after 2021. So you could get Whitney Merciless for a trade, pay him big bucks the next 2 years, or at this point, year plus, and then let him go without losing all that much. So Whitney Merciless is an interesting candidate. He's the definition of a guy a team like Houston should be trying to dump immediately, because that team is not going to go anywhere this year, and they're probably not going to go anywhere the year after with the way Bill O'Brien's run them into the ground. So hopefully they would look at things that way. I don't know if they will. And the last name is our old friend Jacob Martin. And I probably wouldn't be mentioning Jacob Martin if not for the fact that he was familiar with this defense. He's 24 years old. He's got upside. He's got like 6.5 sacks over the last 2 years, and it seems like he's getting better there, and he's already really good against the run. So Jacob Martin would be a really nice and cheap pickup for the Seahawks, in my opinion. Go get that guy back. Houston might view him as part of their future because he's so young and still on his rookie contract, but it's possible they might say, we don't think he's good enough. We're just going to get what we can and move on. So that's what I see from Houston. Those are the guys I would think about calling up and inquiring about. Okay, we're moving on. We are moving on to the Denver Broncos. Who might they be willing to give up in a trade? I don't see anybody on offense they would be willing to give up. I looked up Elijah Wilkinson just for kicks, and apparently he is really bad, so not him. No upgrade from Shell, in my opinion. So I see 2 guys on this defense. The first one is Shelby Harris, DE/DT. He plays on the line. He would play on the defensive line for us. I don't know exactly where. He's 29 years old. 7.5 sacks over the last 2 years, 19 pressures, 16 tackles for loss, and 13 pass deflections. So pretty productive for a defensive tackle. He's been an end in a 3-4 a lot too, I think. So his production's pretty impressive given where he's been playing. Broncos season is obviously pretty shot, so they might be looking to get a little something for a veteran who they know won't be there next year. He's on a 1-year, $3.1 million deal. It is a steal for a quality interior lineman. I would jump all over a trade for Shelby Harris if it's on the table. And the final name is Jarrell Casey. Currently injured, but I don't think it's long-term. He's basically in the same boat as Shelby Harris. He's 30 years old. He's got 12 sacks over the last 2 years, 49 pressures, really solid for an interior lineman, 16 tackles for loss over the last 2 years as well. He's got a fat cap hit, $11.8 million this year. His contract expires in 2022, but there's an easy out after 2020 and 2021. So you can pick up Jarrell Casey for the year. If he plays good, you can keep him. If he doesn't play good, you can cut him with little concern about your contract of your cap situation. So those 2 guys would be the only guys on Denver I'm seeing. I don't think Denver's going to be willing to give up Bradley Chubb yet. He was too good as a rookie and he got injured last year. It's too early to sell him. If they did, I would certainly consider it, but I don't think Denver's going to consider trading Bradley Chubb yet. I think for whatever flaws Elway has as a GM, he's not that kind of reactionary. All right, we're moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is a team that needs to be flushed. desperately. This team needs to be flushed. And if the Seahawks team can be the beneficiary of that, we should try to take that opportunity. So let's go through. To me, if you're the Eagles, everybody's on the table. Literally everybody, with the exception of maybe your rookies. So with that in mind, let's start with Lane Johnson. And the money probably makes this impossible, and the money probably makes me not even really want to do it. But Lane Johnson is an elite right tackle. He would immediately transform this offense. 30 years old, not old yet. 3-time Pro Bowler, still a Pro Bowler. He made the Pro Bowl last year. His cap hit this year is a modest $10.3 million. It does accelerate in the coming years, and his contract runs all the way through 2025. So I get the sense that the contract is going to make this pretty much impossible. But if there's any way to make it happen, I would at least have to think about it, because Lane Johnson is really good, and he would completely transform this offense. All right, so let's jump to the defense now, because I like a lot of pieces on this defense, and I think we should consider trading for a lot of them. So let's start with Derek Barnett, 24-year-old blue chipper, 14th overall pick a few years ago. And the thing with Derek Barnett is he keeps approaching his potential, but he never reaches his potential. He gets hurt, he doesn't produce at a high level, but then he flashes. So he's clearly talented, clearly good. It just hasn't resulted in a big season yet. Over the last 2 years, he's got 9 sacks, 37 pressures, and 15 tackles for loss. This might be the kind of guy the Eagles decide to sell on now if they don't believe in. If they don't think he's going to ever get there, it makes sense to try to get a little value for him now and just move on to the next group of Eagles players. I could definitely see them being willing to sell. Next up is the next defensive lineman, Malik Jackson. They signed him in 2019, and he had a major injury. He came back this year. So far, this year really hasn't done that much, but he's been very good in the past. He made a Pro Bowl once upon a time. He's 30 years old. In 2018, he had 3.5 sacks, 21 pressures, and 7 tackles for loss. So in recent memory, he's still played quite well. So it's not particularly expensive either. The cap hit for Malik Jackson this year is $4.7 million. It accelerates a lot next year, but then his deal expires. So this is not a terrible option. Next up, we have Fletcher Cox, and this is the big one, and might be so big we would have a hard time getting it done. But Fletcher Cox is a 29-year-old, 5-time Pro Bowler, and over his last 2 years has 14 sacks, 66 pressures, 17 tackles for loss, and you can say that he dropped off last year. He did. He did not play that great last year. He is starting to drop off, but if you get the 2018 Fletcher Cox, our defense just got transformed. Now, the cap hit probably makes this impossible. We're looking at a $24 million cap hit. Contract runs through 2022, so this is probably not a very viable option just because of the money, but if we could make it work somehow, that's something that could transform this defense. Brandon Graham is next. Again, I think the Eagles just need to flush their team, so I think everybody should be on the trading block. So I'm going to just talk about all these guys because I think they're all talented. Brandon Graham's getting old. He's 32 years old now. 12.5 sacks, 56 pressures, 24 tackles for loss in 2018 and 2019 combined. $6.3 million cap hit this year, which is not bad. He does have a much bigger cap hit in 2021, but then his contract expires. So the cap hit would not be that bad. The contract would not be that bad. I would definitely call the Eagles about Brandon Graham and see what you could do. And the final name I'm going to throw out there is somebody the Eagles just acquired, and they might be regretting it because of how bad their team is, and that is Darius Slay. The contract kind of scares me off of this, but we are talking about a 3-time Pro Bowler, 29 years old. He's got 5 interceptions over the last 2 seasons, including 30 pass deflections, which is really good. His cap hit this year is only $4.3 million, but after the cap hit of this year, you have 3 years and $50 million left, so it gets expensive, but something to consider going forward. We all know contracts can be worked around. So that's the Eagles to me, in my opinion, with the exception of Rager and I guess you would say Javon Hargrave and maybe Jalen Hurts. Everybody can go on this Eagles team. All right, we're moving on to the New York Giants. Another dumpster fire team that needs to start selling. Offensively, I only see one piece that entices me. That is Cameron Fleming, the right tackle. Don't bring me any stuff about Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is terrible at football. I know some people are going to do it. Don't do it. Cameron Fleming, right tackle. He's 28 years old. Played pretty well the last couple years in pass blocking. It seems like he's doing all right. The Giants might want to move on from him because he's already middle-aged, and the Giants look like they're headed towards rebuild part 2. He's only on a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. The Giants might want to move on to Matt Pert because they just drafted him. They might want to throw Matt Pert out there and start getting him some experience. And Fleming seems like he would be an upgrade over Shell. Okay, defensively, there are a few pieces here that caught my eye. I'm going to start with Dalvin Tomlinson. He's more of a run stuffer, which we don't love because our run stuffing is actually pretty good, but he's still a playmaker in the trenches. He's 26 years old, so he's still young. And over the last 2 years, he's got 3.5 sacks, which is not very good. 21 pressures, which is but 108 tackles and 12 tackles for loss. And he's playing on this terrible Giants team, by the way. So Dalvin Tomlinson is interesting to me. I'm not crazy excited about it because we don't need our run defense to get helped. We need pass rushers, but kind of intriguing. And we also have Leonard Williams, who, to me, is kind of already written his story as a bust in this league. I think if he was going to be a breakout star, he would have already done it by now. He was the 5th overall pick, so he is a blue chipper, but it just hasn't happened yet. But he is 26 years old. He does have 5.5 sacks and 49 pressures, which is actually really good over the last 2 years. 98 tackles, 13 tackles for loss. And so far this year, he's playing well. 2 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. So maybe Leonard Williams is a decent pickup from a team that is truly looking to offload some of these veterans, I'm sure. Next up, we have outside linebacker / defensive end Lorenzo Carter. This is a young piece that the Giants might want to hold on to for another year or two just because he's young enough to where it's believable he could be really good in 2 years when the Giants are maybe good again. But Lorenzo Carter is 24 years old. Last 2 years, he has 8.5 sacks, 42 QB pressures, and 13 tackles for loss. Pretty good numbers. He's been on a terrible team that plays from behind a lot too, so I think that plays to his favor. And he's playing pretty well so far in 2020. He's got a sack and 2 tackles for loss. It seems like he's getting better. If you could trade for Lorenzo Carter, steal him from the Giants while they don't know what they're doing, while they don't know what their future holds, I would jump on that. Last name for the Giants, Marcus Golden. Not really excited about this one either, but in 2019, he was a resurgent player. He had 10 sacks, 44 pressures, and 13 tackles for loss. He had a great year for the Giants. So far in 2020, he's been invisible. I don't know if that's him. I don't know if it's the team, but he's only 29, so it feels like he's got something left, and it might not be the worst idea in the world to go kick the tires on Marcus Golden and see if you can get him for a cheap pick to get the Giants out of that $10 million contract they gave him, because that $10 million is not going to help them win any games this year, clearly. All right, we are moving on. We got 2 teams left, guys. Home stretch. I know this is a long video, but this is important. We got to talk it through. All right, Minnesota Vikings, 0-3, looking pretty bad. I only see 2 players on this Vikings team that I think are worth talking about in terms of a trade target. The first is Brian O'Neill, right tackle. 25-year-old. He's got a solid pedigree. He was the 62nd overall pick a couple years ago. The last 1,100 or so snaps he's played, Brian O'Neill has only given up like 2 or 3 sacks. So he's given up very little in pass protection over his last 1,100 snaps. So it is possible that Brian O'Neill would be a big upgrade over Brandon Shell. The Vikings probably need to hit the rebuild button, but Brian O'Neill is good enough and young enough to where they might view him as part of the future. So I don't know if the Vikings would be willing to trade him, but interesting idea. And the only other name I see is this name right here, which I'm going to do my best on, but Ifeanyi Ognigbo. That was the best I could do. But he's a good player, 26 years old. He broke out last year. He had 7 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 18 QB pressures. Hasn't done anything yet this year. Might be because the Vikings are just getting blasted off the field whenever their defense is on the field. So he seems like he's got potential. He did some nice stuff last year. Not a bad idea to try to steal him from the Vikings while they try to tank for Trevor, except they can't because they gave Kirk Cousins all that money. All right, final 0-3 team. The moment you've all been waiting for, maybe. Atlanta Falcons, 0-3. Who can you take from the Atlanta Falcons? Well, this first one might be sacrilegious to even say. I don't think Atlanta would get rid of this guy for the same reason that Houston wouldn't get rid of J.J. Watt. But if you're being real, this Atlanta team is a ways away from competing again. They are a ways away. They need to get a new coach. By the time they get a new coach, they might need a new quarterback. By the time they get a new quarterback, Julio's going to be maybe 35, 36. You don't know. You got to start thinking about moving Julio Jones, who is also starting to have minor injury issues. So if the Falcons decide, hey, let's get what we can for Julio, let's give him a chance to go get a ring. We're not doing anything this year. You could call him up. Over the last 2 years, the dude is still an absolute boss. 212 receptions, 3,000 yards, 14 TDs. It's a monster cap hit. It's a lot of money. I don't know if we can make it work, but if the opportunity is there, I think you find a way. We're talking about a $20 million cap hit this year. Contract runs through 2023. It's a pipe dream to make that cap hit work with this current cap situation, but Julio Jones, to me, might be worth doing. Just something to throw out there. The other name is not really a position of need, but he might be very, very cheap, and he might help with depth. So I'm going to throw out Alex Mack. I kind of wanted him this offseason. He's 34 years old, so he is old, but he's still good, and he's still reliable. Still dependable, still a good pass protector, still a good run blocker. Has one more good year in him, I think. Why should he have to waste it on an Atlanta Falcons team that may very well win 3 games this year? He's got a $10.6 million cap hit on an expiring deal. No problem. If he can come in here and start and at least help our depth situation with our interior offensive line that can't stay healthy, then sign me up for that. All right, let's go to the defense real quick. I see 2 guys here that the Falcons might be willing to trade that makes sense for us. First is Takaris McKinley. He's only 24, so they might want to cling on to him and see if he can, be part of the next Falcons team. But 10.5 sacks, 45 pressures, and 14 tackles for loss in the last 2 seasons. We saw him in week 1, and he played pretty good. He's played pretty well so far this year. There might be something here. If you can get your hands on Takaris McKinley, he could help your defense a lot. And the final name, we're going to go to the big cannon again, Grady Jarrett. 27 years old, which makes me feel like the Falcons are probably just going to hold on to him. He made the Pro Bowl last year. 13.5 sacks, 54 pressures, 24 tackles for loss in the last 2 years. Playing great so far in 2020. He's got 2.5 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. Pretty big cap hit, but not unmanageable. $12.3 million this year. Contract runs through 2022. Would the Falcons actually move him? I mean, if you look at how bad their team is and how bad they need a new coach, going to need a new QB soon, new did this, new that, new this and that. Just, it seems like Grady Jarrett might be 33 by the time they get all this stuff sorted out. So I don't know if they would move him, but I would definitely spam their phone line with requests for trading for Grady Jarrett. And that's going to take us home, guys. Long video, one of the longest I've made in a long time, but there was a ton to get through here. It is week 3. It's time to take a look at those broken down, busted cars and rip the components out that you can use. That's what I'm going to say about that. So those are some guys that I think the Seahawks should consider trading for that would make our team better. Not just give us another body, not just make us a little more deep, actually make this team better. And look, some of these guys won't fit our system. Some of these guys won't be available. Some of these guys are going to be too expensive. Some of these guys are going to demand top picks. I get that. I just want it to be exhaustive. Who do you guys want? Who do you guys want to trade for? I can see many different angles on how to approach this upcoming trade deadline because we have from now until the trade deadline to poach players from these bottom feeders. Do you want to trade for the offense and try to give us the best offense in the league? Do you want to trade for defense and try to save this terrible defense, even though Carroll has shown time and time again he can't make this defense good, even with trades and draft picks and free agent signings? I don't know how to look at it, but I'm going to wrap that up. Long video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys appreciate the content. See you guys later tonight in stream. Go Hawks. Let's make a deal, guys. Let's make a deal.